I had it like 98 dB sitting, 8, 10
So
feet away.
how far was the knob?
I don't know. Oh, that's another negative.
I don't want to steal Lewis's thunder because I know he loves it.
I hate it.
System. If I could only have one system and it didn't cost crazy amounts of money and it could play all my music, this might actually be it. Yeah. Hi everyone, it's Adrian from Audio Excellence, and that's Lewis on my right and Alex behind the camera. And of course our friend Philip is not here. Today we will be reviewing the AudioNote Cobra integrated amp and the AudioNote J speakers with the Hemp woofer. So these are some details. This is AudioNote UK. As many of you may know, or some of you may know, AudioNote was started back in the 70s in Japan, and then somehow they ended up with two separate companies, AudioNote UK and AudioNote Japan. AudioNote UK sells products that range from CD players, DACs, turntables, speakers, a whole system actually, whole systems, and they have different levels, level 1 to level 5. 5, I believe, being the top of the line. Whereas AudioNote Japan, the original founder, has passed away, and I believe it's still carried out through his son or family members. The products tend to be much more specialized, and I believe it's mostly electronics. So two very different companies, in some respects two separate philosophies, but ultimately trying to achieve the same goal, which we'll talk about in a moment. So here are some details. The AudioNote Cobra integrated amplifier comes with an internal DAC. It's rated at 20 watts per channel, 28 watts per channel, pure class A. It uses two EL34s per side, two 6AU6 as the input tubes, and two 5670s as double triodes. Double triodes as cathode coupled phase splitters. The small tubes are actually new old stock, so they're brand new, but they were manufactured many, many years ago. The built-in DAC is a Philips Tda 1543, which many still consider one of the most musical DACs. The transformers are all designed and custom made by AudioNote, and many of the parts that are inside are also AudioNote parts, including resistors, capacitors. There are 3 RCA inputs and 3 digital inputs. The 3 digital inputs include coax, optical, and USB. Guess who just showed up? Hey. Good morning. Hey. And all digital inputs are converted to the native 44.1 because the DAC only does 44.1. So regardless of what your sampling rate is and so on and so forth, the resolution, even if it's 24-bit, it'll come in 24-bit, it'll be reproduced at 16-bit. And it comes with a remote control. Then the AudioNote speaker is the ANJ with the Hemp woofer. You can tell it's a Hemp woofer because it's a blue driver. And then a silk dome tweeter, so it's 8-inch woofer and a 1-inch tweeter. It's bi-wireable, birch ply for enclosure, first order crossover, in other words 6 dB per octave. All the components inside are hardwired, air core chokes, there's a lot of stuff here. Basically, good quality parts. And similar size is available in various versions, so you can spend quite a bit more if you wanted much better parts inside, better drivers, better sound, and on and on and on. One thing that's interesting is that the speakers, the factory says that every loudspeaker in a stereo pair matches each other and matches a master curve to within 0.4 dB. So in other words, once everything is assembled in the speaker, they then make sure that the left and right speakers match each other within 0.4 dB and match the master curve to 0.4 dB. 6 ohms, 93 dB sensitivity, 25 to 23 kilohertz plus or minus 6 dB in room. Minimum recommended power is 7 watts RMS, 150 watts max, 13 kilograms or 28.6 pounds. 585 millimeters. You know what? He'll just overlay the information on this so I don't have to read all this stuff. Okay. Oh, prices. The Cobra integrated amp is 8,000 Canadian. I don't know what it is in the States. And it is $7,000 for the speakers plus $1,450 for the stands. Okay. Who wants to start?
Well, I don't want to steal Lewis's thunder because I know he loves it. He loves this system.
Change your mind, Lewis. Say you hate it.
I hate it.
Okay, there you go.
You hate the fact that I'm going to speak first.
Yes.
Yes. I loved it. It was great. It's like
pair of old jeans.
exactly. It's like that pair of jeans that they found in some mine shaft in Colorado or someplace like that.
Where does he come up with these?
It's sold for $97,000 US.
You're kidding.
Vintage jeans that you find in these places, they look for them. They sell for a lot of money. Why? Because it's of another time. And I feel like that this system, their approach is of another time. It's not audiophile. It's something else. It reminds me of the first thing that popped in my mind when I was listening to it yesterday, especially yesterday, because we had everything kind of optimized. It sounded to me like a really good Fisher receiver. It had that kind of sound. Not the most articulate in the bottom end, but that's fine. It was really saturated. I wouldn't say warm per se, like some of the vintage stuff can be warm for the sake of being warm. In other words, everything would sound warm. This
like old CJs.
Old CJs, yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah. We listened to it also with an Audio Research D70, which we got in here on consignment, and I thought it sounded a little bit lush, which you were surprised when I mentioned it to you. So it sounded to me like vintage equipment, but depending on what you played, it could obviously have more clarity, and it was much more focused and together in the mid-range and especially in the top end. So in that respect, they didn't color everything exactly the same way. It's a little bit of neutrality in a way you don't expect, but for the most part, it has a flow and sense of pace that is not super fast like Name, but it definitely has this kind of like it takes you along the ride, and you're sitting there and you find yourself tapping your toe, and you're swinging to the music, and you're chair dancing. So I really love this system. It sounds to me like a really good expression of what vintage should sound like and what audio should sound like. It's way different from everything else that we have in here, including Macintosh, in a way that's really good. I love that DAC that's inside the chip. Is Philips 1543. I don't know where they got them, but
they probably bought out whatever was available.
Whatever was available. So, it's a ladder DAC. It's a 16-bit ladder DAC. The limitation, obviously, is it doesn't like to take in, I cannot take a 24-192 signal. It can take...
It truncates everything down.
It does sample it down because the chip itself is limited to 16-bit word length. That's not an issue. It doesn't sound like that. And when we used it with Rune, and yesterday we finally had the hifi ZenStream hooked up to it, Rune was showing that Rune itself, the software, would take everything down to 2496. Because I did send through 24-192 stuff to the DAC, and Rune was taking it to 2496, and then the DAC itself will reduce it down to Redbook. But it didn't sound like Redbook. It sounded much better. It sounded like it had full resolution. But maybe it just does enough of it. Like, it does a really good job. You hear all the kind of modern attributes that we kind of like, which is, there's an extreme amount of ambience. There is there's quite a bit of transparency in the top end, but in a nice soft way. It's not hard brittle at all. This speaker, and you look at it, you go like, that looks like nothing. It literally looks like nothing, because this is the plainest version that they make, except with the exception of the Hemp drivers. And to me, it looked like I've been looking for a pair of Boston Acoustic A70s, and it looks very much like that. I mean, albeit with a first order crossover, which is essentially just a capacitor. I mean, but you hear the blending is so good, you cannot differentiate between the tweeter and the mid-range mid-bass driver. I really loved it. It had that kind of invitational quality that I love so much. I think that is very musical. I think that's what this system has. The whole system I mean, I noticed that the speakers would totally disappear, and you're getting all that stuff in the middle, and you don't hear the box, and it's non-critical. That's the way I heard it. What do you think, Lewis?
Well, first of all, the Cobra amp should be renamed Anaconda because it's amazing.
You know, an anaconda constricts you. A cobra.
Yeah, but the Anaconda, it just moves really slow.
And it squeezes you to death.
Well,
in a hug. He loves the hug.
How about?
Yeah. But I still mad with you because you kicked me over the cliff when you were playing my song.
Your song. It's on my playlist.
It doesn't matter.
You have to come up with your playlist, and then you can play whatever you want.
No, but you shouldn't have cut it off.
What song are we talking about?
He's talking about that Buddy Holly song. Holly song.
It's one of the greatest songs I've ever heard.
You know, Wendell came here one time.
What song are we talking about?
The way.
It's on that playlist. It's on your playlist too.
It's actually one of the most beautiful songs.
It's an
I've
early
ever heard.
stereo recording. You know the one.
1959 or something like that. I think.
Earlier.
True Love Ways.
Yeah,
True Love Ways.
Ways. So you know that Wendell. We played that song for Wendell one of the first times he was here.
Wendell from Magnepan.
Yeah, Wendell Diller, and he was flabbergasted, and it sounded unbelievably good. With that 30.7 for condos setup. I played it for him. He said, well, I got to put that on my playlist.
Anyways, first of all, when those speakers were put into the AV room, we had the synthesis on it. When it was set up, we had two audiophiles come in here. I won't name the names. And I played it for them. And the guy says, you know what? This thing sounds better than my system at home. This is what you call musical. I brought him in this room and I played a system in here, and he says, it sounds good, but it's not musical like the audio note. And I'm going, Anyways, further to that, I find it with the Cobra and the speaker extremely musical. Bass is fast, articulate, and tight. Not flabby at all. We had moved it at one stage closer to the wall, and I didn't like how it sounded.
Well, they wanted like corner loaded into the extreme.
Yeah.
So it's designed to sit and fit into a corner.
Yeah, it just didn't work out the way I thought it would. So we pulled it back out, and it's fabulous. Bass is extremely plenty with that combination tube amp. Treble is smooth and refined, not bright to bring on fatigue. Mid bass is very smooth and not shouty with both the male and female vocals. One negative I find is that the finishes on both products are not up to what we're accustomed to in a North American type.
Well, for that kind of pricing, certainly.
For that type of pricing. And second to that is it doesn't have the WAF, I don't think, aesthetic, the wife approval factor.
Well,
So,
hardly any equipment does, Lewis.
Well-
I mean, how much stuff has your better half prevented you from taking home?
oh, well, not prevented. It just won't go because it's not going to be accepted.
Denied.
It's just not going to happen. So
It's not wife approval factor, it's wife disapproval factor.
Okay.
It actually should be WDF.
Okay, WDF, sorry. Anyways, to wrap it up though, it's a fantastic system for the price. I've heard a lot of systems in here, and I tell you something, this is really the real thing.
It's the real thing.
It's the real thing, man.
I just did an install of a pair of Sashas, Wilson Sashas, and my client has a pair of, well, I don't know what vintage they are, but he has a pair of ANJs in the room, and it did all the same things. I mean, and then he actually had it away from the wall because he couldn't. It's a really big room, but with a 40-watt amp, it just filled the entire room. It was very, and again, all that kind of musicality in a non-critical way that emphasize kind of like a kind of mid-range density that for a lot of speakers they just don't have.
The combination is amazing. That's all I can say.
Okay, Adrian's going to refute us.
Well, no, actually, well, let's start with some bad news first. So I had the pleasure of helping to unbox it. I believe some of you may have helped. I can't remember. It's been a couple of weeks or so. So first, bad news. Packaging sucks. The cardboard is as thin as it gets for both the speakers and the amplifier. When you slit it open and you open up the flaps to fold down so you can get the components out, or
it's not the thickest cardboard.
No, it's cheap. Thank God the internal foam is pretty good. It's strong enough so it will withstand the typical shipping issues. Let's see. Manual is typical audiophile stuff. So basically printed sheets, nothing special. Although
it's got color. It's two color.
Well, it depends on which one you're looking at. The manual for the amplifier in this case is not bad. For the Cobra, it's not bad. It actually has a diagram. It tells you exactly where you should put the tubes and so on. The manual for the other component, which we won't talk about until later, really sucked. No diagrams whatsoever.
But you're a guy, you don't read manuals.
I don't, but I thought I would look at it just to see what it's about. And then last but certainly not least, there's no tube cage for the amplifier. That can be a no-no for some of you because you may have cats, dogs, children, and so on, and you cannot locate the amplifier somewhere that might be out of reach.
So when you look at the Cobra, it's got fairly tall EL34s in it, and the tubes, the top of the tubes are beyond the height of the cover for the transformers behind it. So certainly it would be very difficult to put it into something because the tubes are exposed, and not just from the front but from the back as well.
In most cases you should at least have some sort of a tube cage as an option if you want, but it should at least come with something like that. And then I shouldn't say that was last. I hate the fact that the power on-off switch is in the back. There is no power on-off switch in the front, which is absolutely stupid. So if you have to put this amplifier into a cabinet of some sort, and you have to reach around to the back to turn it on, it's insane. There should be something in the front. You know how I constantly bug the guys at Hagel about how there's no indication of which model it is. This thing is just as bad because the on-off switch is in the back. In fact, this is worse because every time you turn the amp on, you have to go in the back and turn it on, and when you turn it off, you have to do the same thing.
Yeah, but we put it on the top shelf. That's easy enough to reach around.
If you can, yeah. Okay, so those are some of the bads. I should also point out the manual says that the break-in is approximately 200 hours, and then each time, if you want the amplifier to sound its best, it's about 30 to 45 minutes. Tube life is rated at approximately 6,000 hours. Warranty is 2 years, and the tubes are 90 days. Okay, so like the boys, I really loved it. As a system, at a later date, we'll try combining things just to see if we can get a sense of individually how each component sounds like. But as a system, instant magic. Instantly pulls you in, very musical, intensely musical, effortlessly musical. It's like you can play anything and it just sings. It's one of those situations where I was thinking about this as I was playing music. If I were an audiophile but hated the fact that so much of my music is not playable through a typical high-resolution audiophile system, this would be, if budget allowed and you had the room for it, this would be the perfect second system where I could play almost anything. And I mean almost anything. I went through this morning and I played some of the dirtiest, most horrible recordings that I know of, my own stuff. And it did it. I went from, I started with Elvis Presley, Jailhouse Rock. And the reason I started with that was because
Elvis is like a theme with you, isn't it?
So Elvis, the movie has been on playing HBO, right? Recently. It's a terrible movie. I don't know how.
I couldn't get through it.
Neither did I. How could Tom Hanks, who has been consistently so great in so many movies, choose this movie? Maybe the editor or
But
anyway,
the music wasn't even that.
It was terrible. It's a terrible movie. Anyway, but because of that, So I've been playing some. So yeah, I put on Jill, and right away you start grooving to the music, and you forget how good Elvis was during that time. I mean, it was incredibly infectious. And so Philips said Pratt was okay, pace, rhythm, and timing. I found the opposite.
I didn't find it like as insistent.
I did.
You
Now,
did?
maybe I was just cranking it. In fact, if I remember, I had it like 98 dB sitting, 8, 10
So
feet
how,
away.
how far was the knob?
I don't know. Oh, that's another negative. The knob had no markings on the
There's a
chassis.
mark. Well,
on the chassis.
not on the chassis, but there's a indent on the
Yeah,
knob.
and so you can't see anything. And anyway, I had it cranked, I suspect. It was like 98 dB peaks at and cranking consistently. And I didn't even know it was that loud because I was just enjoying myself so much. So yeah, then I found that the pace, rhythm, and timing was superb, like absolutely superb. I kept thinking, this is name quality. This is name
But
quality.
without that slight hardness.
Absolutely. Very, very enjoyable. Johnny Mathis, who I love from time to time. There you go, Lewis.
Well, chances are.
Right? So there's this song, again, back in the 50s or so. It's Not For Me to Say. His trademark vibrato is incredible. Like he vibrates his vocal cords more than anybody else.
Yes,
right?
that warbling. That he does.
On and on and on and on. Just it's all there. It's a mono recording, but you don't notice it because it's so enjoyable. He's right there in the room. As Philip pointed out, the center image is right there.
Well, that's what mono recordings do.
Yeah.
And this thing definitely handles it very well.
Totally. Then I played Sonny Rollins' Way Out West. I'm an old cowhand. Tenor saxophone, incredible. The blat when he plays it hard, unbelievable. Dynamics, micro and macro, incredible. No harshness whatsoever. Then I decided, okay, these couple of not so good recordings, let me play some really bad recordings. So I played, I guess, AC/DC. I played a lot of metal. And surprisingly enough, very listenable.
So what, you were listening to GNR?
Yes, Guns N' Roses, that's right. So I was going through 3, 4, 5 songs. I was going through all these different recordings that are at best average, in many cases worse. And I was still very
Did you
much
play any
enjoying
Rush?
it. No, I forgot. Yeah, some of you guys who said, what kind of Canadians are you that you don't like Rush? Well, I listened to Triumph. Ha!
Triumph, oh.
Ha!
Ha.
Anyway, very, very, very enjoyable still. You can tell that it's not a great recording, but it didn't put it front and center in your face and say, this is a terrible recording, play something else. So the phrase, you lose sight of the forest for the trees, right? This is a system where the forest is what's preserved. You see the entirety, the gestalt, as Jonathan Valin used to always want to say. You see the whole picture, and while the details are there, they're not highlighted.
See, isn't this like kind of anti-audiophile?
Very much so. As I said, this is one of those systems where you could, if you loved your audiophile system, but you also want to play, your ABBAs and your John Denvers and so on, this is the system that can do all of that quite well. Without having to give up too much of the audiophile stuff. However, but if you did play audiophile stuff, so our friend Val played Kashmir for me, a year ago. So the song is called Kashmir, Kashmir, by a gentleman called Masin Petrozelik. Plays acoustic guitar, slaps on the guitar with his fingers and with his palm. Very dynamic, incredible deep bass. Every so often, very, very punchy, very, very powerful. By the way, when I was at CDA recently, that's all they were playing everywhere. There were some people just cranking it just to show how dynamic their systems were capable of being. So it can span the range of average or poor quality to incredibly good. The trade-off, however, is that incredibly good recordings, if you were trying to listen into the recordings, to look into all the details and so on, this is probably not the system that would be my first choice, because it is not the most transparent. It doesn't pull everything apart for the sake of doing that. It's designed for music.
So did you notice that I was playing some of my tracks, which I find extremely emotional.
Yes.
And I didn't get as much of that as I would normally get with the equipment that we have on hand. It just seemed to dampen it a little bit, the exuberance. Some of the exuberance that raises the hair on the back of my neck. It just doesn't happen with this system, but it seemed to raise the level of everything else.
I didn't find that. As a matter of fact, interesting that you pointed that out. So one of the songs that I've always enjoyed from time to time, Bonnie Raitt, I Can't Make You Love Me. Right? George Michael covers this, and he, I believe, really oversins it. But
he's not a crooner.
But when she sings it, it's much softer, much more pensive, more reflective. It's a song about unrequited love, right? A compromise that she is willing to make. For me, when I played it, it came through. It made me very sad for her when I listened to this song. So
I played Hey Laura, and
you played that song for a million times.
But I know it in a million systems, and I know what it can do to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't get quite as much of that.
Okay.
I mean, I got some of it. Don't get me wrong. It does it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a little bit less, and the longing was not quite so long.
Was not as long.
You know what, though? The system is very musical.
It's extremely musical. You get the idea of what it's playing.
So, the other systems, what we have in here, are probably more transparent, right? And you get more.
I think it's a little more dynamic, so that it emphasizes a little bit more of that leading edge and has more slam.
But coming back to when that audiophile gentleman, which we all know here, heard it, he says other stuff is revealing and that, but it's not musical.
Well, like
This is
Adrian said,
very
it's
musical.
this the way this system does with the Cobra and the ANJ Hemps. It's an entirety. It's a complete thing, and you definitely do notice what the forest looks like. Whether or not you see that individual tree there or that's not as important. It doesn't make it important. Other systems do. This system does not. It just plays, and you're sitting there and you're going like, oh, suddenly 2 hours have passed. Like yesterday, that's what happened. It was like 2 hours. I was sitting there and going like, it's just totally, gobsmacked.
Yeah.
But
and there's no weariness after 2 hours neither. I mean,
well, there shouldn't be. It's tubes, right? So.
Yes, but it doesn't. It has that warmth about it, where in that the transistors, the solid state, just don't. I don't know. It just doesn't. I'm not a tube person.
Isn't there like kind of a reverse bias confirmation with this system? It's like when you look at it.
Well, if anything, so let me just elaborate a little bit on what you said about not quite as, because I'm actually thinking about it a little bit more. I can actually see your point a little bit more in that on a highly resolving system playing a really good recording of music that I really enjoy, right? So in other words, all three. I can certainly see that system would pull me in even deeper. But all those kinds of conditions have to be met. So not that long ago, Mike Fremer recommended his version of the symphony, the Beethoven symphonies on, I think it was Deutsche Grammophon. I bought that whole album.
Does Simon rattle?
I think so, yes. And while I don't like the interpretation as much, the recording is absolutely superb, and it does pull me in. And when I listen to my favorites, the Symphony 6, number 5, and 9, and 3, I'm completely blown away by the sound quality and being there and just absolutely enjoying the moment. It'd be interesting to see what it would sound like with the audio note. Whereas, as you are right, the audio note makes everything really good consistently, but maybe not incredibly, at least at this level. We'll see what the Ongaku sounds like when we get it.
I just don't think that the driver is capable of more than what it's doing. And so the kind of things that we tend to like in terms of detail retrieval or portrayal, it's not quite there. The details are there. It's like we say with any system, the details are always there, but it's the balance. And for this setup, they don't have to do it that way. It's I mean, they have much more expensive things. Like when we listen to certain other things that are coming, it's going to be, night and day difference, I think.
Well, we'll look forward to it. But as far as confirmation bias is concerned, if anything, I was biased towards not liking it.
Exactly.
Because when I opened the box, I think the guys remember, I said, oh, this sucks. Look at this box. This is terrible. And then you pick the thing up and, we're used to really nice, well-made, handcrafted stuff. And I look at this thing and it's...
the cardboard is like this thick. It's like this thick.
So, confirmation bias, this was the exact opposite. It actually... floored me with how
it exceeded.
Yeah, how enjoyable the system is. Yeah. So for me, the summary is, if you are far more of a music enthusiast, but still want some of the audiophile stuff, this easily fulfills that criteria. It's like staple food. It's like somebody once asked me the other day, if you could only have one kind of food for the rest of your life, what would you eat? I said instantly Chinese food. Oh, because I grew up as, with Chinese food, so it's comfort food. It's what I would eat. I would have rice all the time if it didn't make me fat. I would have noodles all the time if it wouldn't make me fat. I would have braised, the noodles I buy for you guys from the braised beef with the
all
soup.
the sinews.
It's incredible. Love it.
The fat.
Right? I would eat that every day if I could. So this would be that kind of system. If I could only have one system and it didn't cost crazy amounts of money and it could play all my music, this might actually be it. Yeah. All right. So final words.
Final words is...
No, I mean like up, down, thumbs up.
Oh, definitely thumbs up.
Okay.
There's no doubt about it.
Philip?
No.
So I liked it so much that I actually discussed it a little bit with Lewis before we did the video this morning. So he and I were actually comparing some notes about how enjoyable it was, which we never talk about.
Yeah.
And we were just, so enthusiastic that we had
Couldn't hold
to
it
share it. Yeah, that's right.
So basically 2 thumbs up from all of us, which is quite amazing because a lot of times we have other issues to deal with it. But I think categorically we really love it. So anyway, thank you for watching this. As usual, if you like it, please subscribe, turn on notification and so on. And comments. If you've heard audio notes before, let us know what you thought. If you've never heard it and you're in the area, you'd like to come by and check it out, please do so. Best to always call us or email us first just so we can get it all set up because the amp wants to be on for 30, 40 minutes before it sounds bad and we can set up a room for you. Adrian from Audio Excellence, Philip, Lewis, and Alex behind the camera. We'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.